talking to my dad's writer on Magic Shadows, Ken Sobel, a great guy. And one of his lines, he said, "Why do you want to be a writer?" And I said, "Well, because I want to tell you, come on." He said, "Because it's a cool thing to say at parties."
Raised in the movie-saturated home of his father, legendary TV host Elwy Yost, Graham Yost made his mark as a screenwriter with the wildly successful 1994 movie Speed. He went on to more success with Hard Rain, Broken Arrow, and Band of Brothers. Currently, he works collaboratively with crime fiction writer Elmore Leonard as the showrunner for the highly successful TV series Justified. We met Graham Yost on a visit to his hometown of Toronto. Graham, I wanted to start by asking you about life when you were a kid with your dad. And I'm not sure, people outside of Ontario might know your father's name but not be familiar with the show that he did on TVOntario for like 25 years, Saturday Night at the Movies. I was a fan. If there was and I'll say this right off the top, if there was an audio recording of your father saying, "Turn down the lights and put up your feet," I think I would do it by rote. Mm-hmm. What was it like living with a dad who was that ensconced in movies?
Oh, I mean, movies were everything in our family.
Yeah.
We talked about them all the time. It was something when the TV Guide would come in, or in the Toronto Star, the TV Week, or whatever it was called, he would go through it and highlight things that were on during the week. Because this was, antediluvian. This was before VCR, before DVD, right, anything like that.
You had to know exactly when things were on.
Yeah, you had to watch them when they were on. So our sort of week would be scheduled around that.
You must have been absorbing film information, I would think, from him, just by osmosis?
You know, when the Saturday Night at the Movies show had been on a few years, we would get calls, because he was in the book, we'd get calls on almost any night, but usually a Saturday night. It'd be someone drunk in a bar saying, I've got a bet with my friend that it was Gene Arthur in Arizona and not Gene Lambert. And he would get on the phone and answer it. But sometimes he wouldn't be home, and I'd answer, and I'd go, "Yeah, it was Gene Arthur," and just hang up, because I knew that stuff. We always had the big film books around. Yeah. As a kid, my fascination was for, like horror and science fiction and action and stuff like that. So I was really into, like, Famous Monsters of Filmland and those magazines. But my dad supported that because he had loved horror when he was younger and still did.
What about writing? You said in previous interviews that you knew pretty early that you wanted to be a writer. Is that right?
Yeah, I would think. I went to University of Toronto, and I think while I was there, I pretty much figured out that I was not going to be a medieval scholar like my hero J.R.R. Tolkien, because I took first year Old English, and I can remember 4 words. Okay. So,
hang on a second now, nerd boy. Let's go back a little bit. Your hero was J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yes, he was. Okay. He was. I read. My dad started me reading Lord of the Rings. He hadn't finished it. But he'd started it, and he'd told me stories about it. And so I picked it up, and I started going, and I read it. I ended up reading it 5 times. Our family is a family of weepers. We cry at the drop of a hat. You'll probably get me to cry during this.
Okay,
but,
no.
It just happens. You have no control over it.
Okay.
So he finally got back into it. He was reading it, the one big single-volume paperback. And he would read it on the subways going to work at TVO. And I noticed his bookmark was getting toward the end. And I said, "Dad, I see you're getting toward the end." He said, "Yeah, I'll probably finish in the next day or 2. I said, "Read it at home. You don't want to be on the subway when you get to the last page." And he thanked me so much after his own thing. He would have been a blubbering mess, somewhere around Jane Street or something. He and my mom, both big readers, got my brother and I into reading quite young. And he just supported any reading. He was by no means a snob, although he read great works of literature, and he read, pulp stuff. So while librarians were cautioning parents to not have their kids read the Hardy Boys, he said, "Read all you want."
Yeah. So tell me about you. Now, you, like a lot of Canadians, make the transition to the States. When did you do it? At what age? And what was it that lured you there?
I went when I was 22. So this is now will age me, but it was back in 1982. I remember talking to my dad's writer on Magic Shadows, Ken Sobel, a great guy. And one of his lines, he said, "Why do you want to be a writer?" And I said, "Well, because I want to tell you, come on." He said, "Because it's a cool thing to say at parties." And Anyway.
And it is.
Well, it is, yeah. But there were some backfires on that over the years. But, so I was interested in that, and my friend Joel Sears, who's a writer himself, he got into writing screenplays. He tried that. I got interested in that, and I gave it a try, and I was terrible. But it hooked me. And then the summer of '82, I took a film course at NYU. And it was a great course. We made 6 short films in 6 weeks. I don't even know if they still offer it, but it was a great experience. And that's what got me down to New York, and I just stayed.
Yeah.
And then I started writing anything anyone would pay me to write.
Were you taking writing courses at any point, or was this just?
I took a couple writing courses at U of T.
Yeah.
I didn't really commit to them. I really didn't take advantage of them. It was really the writing on my own that that's when I was really faced with the reality of it's got to get better or you don't get to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that was the big school of writing for me. Though I always tell young people, if you can, go to a film school or go to a writing school.
Right. What was the first? Was Hey Dude the first paying gig you got as a writer?
Yeah, it was preceded briefly by another show on Nickelodeon in the States called Turkey TV, and I was just writing jokes for that.
Okay.
But through that, one thing led to another, and I ended up on Hey Dude.
What was that experience like?
Hey Dude was sort of writer's boot camp. It was wonderful. I mean, I got to be we didn't know what we were doing, so we were making up, titles for people. I was the writer on the set. You notice you don't see that a lot.
The writer on the set.
And I think I was executive story consultant or something. I don't know what it was, but I became the guy. They liked my first script that I turned in, and they wanted to have someone on the set. We were shooting in Tucson, Arizona, so I got to be on the set, and it was that first experience. And I've heard other people in TV say, you never hear this in features, but you write mariachi band one day, and you look out your window the next, and there's a line of mariachi bands, coming into audition. Now, this wasn't like that because we had a zero budget.
Right.
But you'd write something, and the next day you'd shoot it. Mostly teenage actors who were, of various levels, and but they made it work, and the directors were good, and the locations were great, and we had a few solid adult actors to carry.
Was it a collaborative writing experience? Was everybody pitching in, or did you?
It was not. We didn't have a room. It was just freelance writers essentially, and I became the head writer in the second season, and we called it head writer, and we called it head writer because we'd watched the Dick Van Dyke Show, and we knew that Rob Petrie was the head writer. We didn't know. So, I would do a lot of rewriting, and I also wrote a lot of first drafts for that show.
Where'd you go from there?
It was funny. Those things in life. I was grumbling when the show, they figured 65 episodes was enough, and they were just getting started in a scripted fare, and I was kind of grumbling at the end of that they didn't offer me some sweet development deal. I ran the show for them, and I was kind of grumpy, and so I was unemployed. And I was sitting around, and I decided, okay, I'll try and get a job in network TV. So I wrote 2 spec pilots. I wrote a Murphy Brown and a Roseanne, and they were pretty good. And I had a young agent who was a friend who said, yeah, I think I can staff you off these. She said, but it's February. They don't staff until May, so have fun. And I had lunch with a friend, and I said, I've got this idea about there's a bomb on a bus, and the bus can't drop below, And he said, that's good, you should write it. And so I went off and I wrote Speed.
Now, I got to ask you about that, because I have read, you tell me where
it was from my dad.
Was it from your dad?
Well, it's actually from Kurosawa. He stole it from Kurosawa, and I stole it from him.
So your dad saw Runaway Train with John Voight?
No, he didn't see it. He'd heard about a script.
Okay.
And I remember, it stuck in my head, because that's the kind of thing that my dad loved, and I love it. My brother loves it. My brother and I write together now in features when I'm working in TV. And I love the simplicity of it. And then I saw the movie, there, sure enough, it says based on a screenplay by Akira Kurosawa. But I came out thinking, oh, my dad's version was better, because he thought there was a bomb involved.
Right.
But in Runaway Train, they just can't get up to the engine. They just can't get to the brakes, because the train's all frozen. They're in Alaska. And it's a good movie. John Voight's insane, and Rebecca De Mornay is weird, and Eric Roberts is weird. It's all weird, but it's fun. Anyway, I came out thinking, man, it'd be better if it was a bomb. It'd be better if it was a bus. And that was the idea that I had. And I sat on that for several years before I finally wrote Speed.
and initially the bus wasn't supposed to get about 20 miles an hour.
Man, you know the whole deal.
I heard this. No, is it
So,
true?
It's true.
A really slow bus. Now there's
Now there is a reason. It's not a good reason, but there is a reason. So I'd written a bunch of scripts with my friend Paul Boudreau, who's now a professor of, I think the dean of English or something at Simon Fraser. And he and I were in rock bands together, we wrote together, and I told him, I said, Paul, I want to write this one on my own. And I'm sure he's still, we could have written that together. No, he's got a great life in Vancouver. But I said, but I'd still like you to read it. Or I sent him the outline. And he said, it's good, but make it 50, not 20. My rationale for 20, and it's not a good one, but it is rational, is that it should be just beyond foot speed, that you just can't keep up with it. And it's just tantalizingly close.
That's not
so
bad.
That was the reason, but 50 is dynamic.
Better.
20 is not dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. And the ending, my understanding, the ending, and I read this once and I thought, of course, the ending was like Silver Streak.
That I don't know. I'm sure I stole it from Silver Streak, but I can't remember.
Okay. All right. Now you have again.
Oh, Silver Streak. They go into the station.
That's
right.
right.
The train crashes into the station.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in the first draft of the script, there was no subway sequence, and that was something. The script was originally at Paramount, and they said we need a different third act. It can't be all on the bus. I still maintain that the emotional high point of the movie is when
at the end of the bus.
Yeah, when they come out from underneath the bus. That's the end of the movie.
I thought the movie was going to end there too.
And it could. Well, it couldn't, but it should have. But anyway.
All right. Can I ask you just as a little aside here?
Sure.
Only because I'm right now in the midst of reading the new biography of Dennis Hopper. If you have any experiences with Hopper?
No, I didn't. But you know, in the early drafts, the bad guy turned out to be the Jeff Daniels character. It was this whole twisteroo thing, and it was like, and the studio was iffy on that. We thought it was cool, and then they said, no, it's too complicated. The audience just needs to go with it. And I'm thinking, but the bad guy is not part of the thing. He has no relationship to the good guy. And that was honest, and this is, again, a moment back in time. That was really when cell phones were coming into popular use.
Right.
And so, okay, they can have a phone relationship. And then when they cast Dennis Hopper, it was like, okay, that's fine, because he's, you know, America's favorite psycho. So he's perfect.
Yeah.
And that became a big chunk of the movie.
And Josh Whedon did some dialogue rewriting for it too, didn't he?
Oh, he did more than, Josh completely, there's another writer after, I wrote the first 5 drafts or say, and then another writer came in and did an awful job, and I had one of those dark nights of the soul where I'm going, they ruined my baby. And then I came back on for a few weeks, or maybe even less than that. Maybe it was a weekend. God, I can't remember now. And then Joss came on, and I remember reading Joss's first pass, and I had just a huge sigh of relief because he's such a good writer, and he totally got the sensibility, and he didn't change any of the structure. I think there was one added scene, but it was just the flavor, you know. I mean, he punched up my dialogue and just made it better.
Yeah.
So if I had I had the thing about Jack and his partner talking about scenarios, and he turned it into pop quiz hotshot, which became sort of this iconic phrase. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So when it came to, you know, decide on credit, you know, I pushed hard to get a solo credit because I felt that I'd done the yeoman's work of setting the universe and really building the blueprint, and I won. But there's always going to be that feeling of, you know, in the old days they used to have additional dialogue by. I mean, I wish.
Why don't they do that anymore?
You know, it was a Writers Guild thing. They were afraid of watering down the credit, and I understand that, but. You know, the accurate credit on Speed would be, you know, story and screenplay by Graham Yost, additional dialogue by Joss Whedon.
So at the end of it, when it was all over and was successful, did that open doors for you?
Oh God, yes, that changes everything.
It does, eh?
Yeah, that's you're suddenly in the club.
And what happens? People start sending you stuff?
No, I mean a little bit. You know, I got some rewrite work. You know, I always get given grief on the title of this movie, Operation Dumbo Drop. Okay, not the best title, but it was a fun experience. I got to go to Thailand, work with Danny Glover, Ray Liotta, and Dennis Leary, Dougie Doug, among other people. It was that was a blast. But it was also just other ideas that I'd had. While we were working on Speed, I'd had this idea called Broken Arrow, which I had heard of. A friend of mine was going to AFI, and a friend of his at AFI actually told me about this term and the idea of a lost nuclear weapon. And he'd had an idea for a story, but it was not, it was sort of a family drama and stuff. And I said, no, I think this is a big thriller. And so Broken Arrow, Fox bought that idea, and we went and did that. And then Hard Rain, which started out as The Flood, you know, I was back, Mark Gordon and I again, and, you know, after Speed, you know, we could have come in and pitched anything.
Is that right? I mean, it's like that, is it? I mean, I've
you
heard,
know,
but
yeah, because so much is guesswork, and they think, well, if they've had a hit before, they can have another hit.
They must know what they're doing. Yeah,
yeah.
Okay.
We don't know what we're doing.
Well, without going through all the stuff that you've done, we have to bring us to
Why
Justified
not?
now.
Okay.
Well, we could. But we don't, why not? Well, because I was afraid you might cry. That's
there you go.
I want to talk to you about Justified. I am, again, one of my long addictions has been Elmore Leonard and stuff, and I interviewed him about 20 years ago. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he is.
How did you come to him, and how did
Well, you know, it's another Grumpy Graham story,
Yeah.
which is finished up on The Pacific, which is an HBO miniseries about World War II, Marines in the Pacific Theater. So I'm back home. This is now 2008. I've got a deal with Sony, and a friend and I, Fred Golan, who I've worked with since Boomtown, he's the second writer in command, as it were, at Justified. We'd written a script for Sony. That hadn't, it sold, but anyway, I owed Sony something else. And I had an idea, but it ended up being too close to Falling Skies, the Spielberg show, which I ended up working on the first season. But anyway, we needed something for me to do. And so we couldn't sell my alien invasion story, and they said, well, we do have the rights to this Elmore Leonard short story, and it's with these producers, Sarah Timberman and Carl Beverly, and Michael Dinner is going to direct it. I went, okay, you know, I'll read the story. and I read it, and, you know, like you, I've been a fan of Elmore for a long time. I started with La Brava and then went back and then followed him all the way through. So I was predisposed to like it, and for me, I just got to this one scene in the pilot and in the novella when Raylan has gone to visit Ava to find out where Boyd is, and she goes up to shower, and Dewey Crow comes in the house, and Raylan says, you don't enter someone's house without asking if you can enter, and he sends Dewey out, and Dewey says, oh, I'll be coming back, and he comes out, and there's Dewey with a shotgun, or as he calls it, a scattergun pointed at Raylan, and what got me was Raylan didn't pull his gun. And he just says, here's what's going to happen. Can you rack a load before I put a hole through you? And I just went, okay, this is the coolest character. Yeah. We could have the coolest character on television. And so that's what got me.
You know, it's interesting because at the time that I talked to Elmore Leonard, it was just on the cusp of his material finally being turned into films that he liked.
Yes.
Because at that point, everything that had been made, he hated. And rightly so. Stick was crap, and it was all this stuff that was horrible stuff. And it was just after that, I think, that Out of Sight got made. And then everything changed. Suddenly people were really paying attention to stuff and making them well. What kind of a relationship do you have with him when it comes to this series?
You know, listen, he's done screenwriting, and he understands. And the reason he stopped doing screenwriting is he just didn't like getting notes, you know. So he understands the business, and he just lets us do what we've got to do. Yeah. He doesn't read the scripts. He'll watch the shows, and he doesn't give input, but he came to the set in the first year, and Tim Oliphant, who plays Raylan, was sitting next to him. He says, Elmore, why don't you write another Raylan short story? And Elmore said, okay. And he went off, and he wrote a story, and he had so much fun. And it was this weird thing, because he was using characters that we had created for the series, and we have Boyd alive in the series when he dies at the end of the novella, Fire in the Hole. So it was this odd sort of back and forth thing. And so he wrote one story, enjoyed it so much, he wrote another one, enjoyed that so much, wrote a third, and they're all tied together, and that became his book, Raylan.
The book. Well, now this is
and
where
so that's really his contribution to the show.
Okay.
He said, take the book, hang it up, strip it for parts. And so we said, okay, we'll do that.
Interesting. Because I read the book, having read Fire in the Hole originally. I read the book, but I've also, at that point, had watched, I guess, 2 seasons of Justified, and I'm thinking, hang on a second. Well, I'm getting confused now about who's dead and who's alive.
I know who's dead and who's alive and who's this and who's that. There's a big chunk in the second season already that, because we got to read the book in advance, we got chunks of it as it came along. And so there was this family, Purvis Crow and his sons, Dickie and Coover, and we changed them into the Bennetts, made it Mags Bennett, made it a criminal matriarch instead of a patriarch, and we added a brother. And so that became a big chunk of the second season. I
have to ask you, he is known for his dialogue, for the verisimilitude of his dialogue. Watching that show, I just keep thinking, well, you know, somebody's writing this just as good as he's writing the dialogue in his books. I mean, first of all, just the names alone.
Yeah.
You got to have a compendium of Kentucky names or something. I don't know how you do it.
Well,
but
very Elmorian.
Very Elmorian. But how difficult is it to try and maintain that aura, that atmosphere throughout, well, the 4 seasons that you've done it now? Is it tricky?
Well, I think the biggest trick, honestly, is we're all professional writers, so we can do it. But the biggest trick is not lapsing over into a caricature or self-parody almost, where it's like, oh, that's too Elmore. It's more Elmore than Elmore. So we have to watch that. But we're all fans. First year, we bought all the books, as many as we could get it. There were these things in the past called bookstores. I don't know if you remember them. Yeah. So got all the books and handed them out to the writers, and everyone read a couple. I read Swag and The Hunted, and I think one more that I hadn't read before. And we just started looking for things, character dynamics, scenes, bits of dialogue, approaches. And Tim Oliphant was actually not that well read in Elmore when we started the show, but he's since become, you know, a voracious reader. Yeah. So he'll say, it's like quoting from scripture on our show. And he spake in Tishomingo blues that, you know, and so it all becomes part of the thing. So everyone's looking for it. And then the other thing is trying to keep the dialogue feeling like it's true to Kentucky without it being, again, a caricature. Yeah. And we've got a lot of actors who are from the South, and they kind of police that themselves.
I think Walton Goggins is an amazing casting decision as Boyd Crowder.
That was John Landgraf's idea, the head of FX.
Wow!
And that was one of the big things for the show, was that Landgraf had been a producer on Karen Cisco at ABC, so he already loved Elmore, already knew Elmore, wanted to do right by Elmore, and really let us do a true Elmore Leonard show, which is spend a lot of time with the bad guys.
Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of time with the bad guys. One of the things I had to ask about, though, and this is going back to your father's influence, I just recently watched all of season 4 in one fell swoop.
Wow.
I know, it was great. And you could really keep it all in your head when you do it that way.
That's right.
But there were these moments when I thought, man, this is like Graham Yost channeling his old man, because at one point Raylan makes a reference to Mr. Deeds. What was his first name? Mr. Deeds goes down. Longfellow Deeds.
Yeah, that wasn't me. That was one of the other writers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then the other one that broke me up was this. Ron Eldard, the actor, plays Colt. And I haven't seen him in anything in a while, and he's put on some weight. At one point, there's a phone conversation between Raylan and Colt, and Raylan asks him, "Who's going to play you in the movie?"
No, it's between Tim Gutterson and Colt.
Okay, that's right.
Yes,
and he's going to play in the movie. He says, "A young Gerard Depardieu." And I thought, exactly.
That was sort of our joke behind Ron, but Ron is such a smart guy. He's just a great guy. He got it. He understood it. Yeah, he can look in the mirror and look like a young Gerard Depardieu. And he had lived that. So when I saw that, I died laughing. No, there are some things that I'll put in for my dad. My dad since passed, but also my brother. There's a line in that episode where Raylan says, you know, it's something to the effect, if we have a shootout at Arlo's house, he says to Art, "What do you want, the Battle of Bloody Porch?" And someone says, "What's that?" And Art just goes, "The Wild Bunch." And that was for my brother, in memory of Dad.
All right.
That whole episode was really an episode for Dad.
I guess it shouldn't be too surprising at how much it's caught on with people. I mean, for anybody who's an Elmore Leonard fan, I guess it's not too surprising. But what has intrigued me is that if you go online and look at the number of sites there are related to the minutia of this show, it's almost at Star Trekian levels at some point.
Well, I think that's the case almost with anything now in the internet, sadly.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
You know, I mean, for example, one of our favorite actors who played Sheriff Shelby this year, Jim Beaver, he had a big part on Supernatural. He could make a living going to supernatural conventions.
Right. Okay.
You know, so we don't have justified conventions yet.
Yeah,
if we did, they should all be in Harlan. We should just send all the money down there. The lovely people down there.
Yeah. Speaking of lovely people down there, Is there any mild resentment that you maybe make them look like a bunch of drug-dealing hicks?
You know, I think that there was at first, or there was concern, and then they saw the show and they got the joke too. They're very smart people. Yeah. They love telling a good story. And we went down there, a group of us writers, producers, went down there between the first 2 seasons. And we try to send a couple of writers every year. But at any rate, they would say, "Oh, and I love that character because I know that guy." And you know, they love the camaraderie between good guys and bad guys. I maintain that the best reviews we've ever gotten are that people in the U.S. Marshal Service get a kick out of it. They can't officially, but you know, the rank and file get a kick out of it. It's completely absurd, but because Raylan would have been handed his hat and get out of here, a long time ago, and that the people of Harlan get a kick out of it, and then most importantly that Elmore does. That's the whole reason for doing it.
We got a couple of minutes left, so I want to ask you about the Americans, because again, that's something that I've now gotten addicted to as well. And again, I read something about you coming across, is it Joe Weisberg?
Yes.
He'd written a pilot. And
he'd written a couple books, and he was interested in TV, had an idea for a pilot. Our agents put us together. We went out with it. I gave him some ideas, which I don't know if they helped or not. But, and then we sold it to FX. They never ended up shooting it. It was about a CIA station overseas. But his writing, just right out of the box, was just brilliant. And you just knew. It's like, I've got to attach myself to this guy somehow and just ride his coattails, because he's a great writer.
So you're on that as an executive producer?
Yes.
Which means what exactly?
Well, in this case, I'm sort of the consigliere to Joe and the other showrunner, Joel Fields. I read all the outlines, I read all the scripts, I talk to them about where they want to go with the show and just sort of give them my experience in terms of doing a show for FX. But, they're pretty much on their feet now, although I would like to be, in a sense, more involved this year because they're going to start their writer's room earlier, so I might be able to get to New York for a few days.
Is most of your time now taken up with Justified? Does that occupy pretty much all? Yeah.
When it's going, that's what I do.
Yeah. This has been great talking to you. I really appreciate it. You didn't cry once?
I didn't cry.
You didn't cry once? Maybe your father would not be so proud of you. You
should keep talking about Dad a little more and you'll get it going.
Graham, thanks a lot. This is
really fun. Thank you for having me.